My real family is the one I chose, my daughter said as she raised her glass, smiling at her mother-in-law. Then she looked at me with a cold stare and said, "Your time here is over. You can go now." A deep sadness washed over me, and I stood up, my body still shaking. But in that moment, her fiancé stood up too, and what he did left everyone in shock. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. It all started when I received the invitation to Lily's wedding, my only daughter. At 62 years old, I lived alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Lily and I had a complicated relationship ever since her father, George, passed away 15 years ago. She always blamed me for not maintaining the standard of living we had when George was alive, as if I had chosen to become a widow at 47 years old. I worked 2 jobs to pay for the private college she wanted so badly. I sold all the jewelry I had, even my wedding ring, so she could do an exchange program abroad. I gave up my dreams and my needs so she would never go without. And for years, I thought that would be enough to secure her love. I was wrong. When Lily graduated and got a good job, our conversations became rarer and rarer. She moved to another state, and in the last 3 years, she only visited me twice, always in a hurry, always looking at her watch, as if every minute by my side was a sacrifice. Still, when I received the invitation to her wedding with Andrew, I felt a wave of hope. Maybe this would be our chance to reconnect. Maybe, finally, she would see me as the mother I always was. Imperfect, yes, but dedicated and loving. I spent almost a month's salary on a navy blue dress that made me look 10 years younger. I bought a pearl necklace that perfectly matched the earrings my mother had left me. I spent hours choosing a special gift, a fine china set that I was paying for in 12 installments. Every detail was thought of with care, as if that day could erase all the years of distance between us. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, even though the ceremony didn't start until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I couldn't sleep from the anxiety. I took a long bath, carefully styled my hair, and put on some subtle makeup. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a hopeful woman, with eyes bright with anticipation. Today, everything is going to change, I told my reflection. Today, Lily is going to see me for who I really am. The taxi dropped me off at the church half an hour before the start of the ceremony. I wanted to make sure I got a good seat, preferably in the front row, where I could see every detail on my daughter's face as she said, "I do." I walked into the church, which was decorated with white flowers and golden ribbons, feeling my heart pound with emotion. That's when a young man, with an earpiece and a notebook, approached me. "Excuse me, Mum. What is your name?" "Helen Peterson. I'm the mother of the bride." He checked his list and frowned. "Ah, yes, here you are. You'll be in the 7th row, on the left side." "The 7th row? But I'm the mother of the bride. Shouldn't I be in the front row?" "I'm very sorry, Ma'am, but the instructions are clear. The front row is only for the groom's parents and the couple's closest friends." My face burned with shame, but I swallowed the humiliation and walked to the designated spot. It was so far from the altar that I could barely make out Lily's expressions. I sat among strangers who looked at me with curiosity, probably wondering why the mother of the bride was relegated to such an insignificant place. The ceremony started on time. When Lily walked in, walking down the aisle alone, she had rejected my offer to walk her. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. She was beautiful, radiant, in the white dress that I had only seen in photos she shared on social media. She hadn't invited me to help her choose it. Andrew waited at the altar, looking elegant and emotional. It was the first time I had met him in person, even though they had been together for 2 years. Lily never felt the need to introduce us before. After the ceremony, I tried to approach her to give her a hug, but I was blocked by the crowd of friends surrounding her. I could only wave at her from a distance, receiving a quick, polite smile in return. The reception was in a luxury hotel's ballroom. Again, I was placed at a distant table, on the periphery of the room, along with other guests who were clearly not a priority. People who, like me, had been invited out of obligation, not affection. "Are you a relative of the bride?" asked a lady sitting next to me. "I'm her mother," I replied, trying to maintain my dignity. She seemed genuinely surprised. "The mother? But why are you sitting so far away?" I shrugged, pretending not to care, as I watched Lily circle the room, hugging Andrew's mother with an affection I hadn't received in years. Dinner was served, the music played, and I remained invisible. No one introduced me to the other guests. No one mentioned that the bride's mother was present. It was as if I were a ghost, only physically there, but with no real relevance. When it was time for the speeches, my heart raced. Maybe now. Maybe Lily would say a few words about me, about our relationship, about everything I had sacrificed for her. Andrew spoke first, thanking his parents, his friends, and finally everyone who helped make this day possible. Not one direct mention of me. Then, Lily stood up. Beautiful, radiant, her cheeks slightly flushed from the champagne. She took the microphone and smiled at the audience. "I want to thank everyone who is here today, sharing the happiest day of my life," she began. "Especially those who really matter, who have always supported me and made me who I am." She looked directly at Andrew's parents, smiling with gratitude. "You welcomed me like a daughter. You gave me the family love I always dreamed of." I felt every word like a knife. The family love she always dreamed of. And me? The years I spent raising her, loving her, sacrificing everything. Did none of that count? "I've learned that family isn't necessarily who shares our blood," Lily continued, "but who chooses to be by our side in good times and bad." That's when her eyes met mine for the first time that night. There was no affection in them, no gratitude. There was something cold, distant, almost disdainful. And I also learned that there are people who only bring negativity into our lives, people who drain us, who make us feel guilty, who prevent us from growing. The room fell silent. Everyone seemed to sense that something was wrong, that those words had a specific target. "Mother," Lily said, looking directly at me. Her voice was firm, unwavering. "I think it's time for you to go." The silence became deafening. 200 pairs of eyes turned towards me, some with shock, others with morbid curiosity, and still others with thinly veiled pity. I felt my face burn as if I had been slapped. My hands were shaking so much that I spilled some wine on the white tablecloth. For a moment I was paralyzed, unable to believe what had just happened. My own daughter had kicked me out of her wedding, in front of everyone. Slowly, my legs trembling, I placed my napkin on the table and stood up. I tried to maintain my dignity, even though I was falling apart inside. I started walking towards the exit, feeling the weight of all the stairs on my back. That's when something unexpected happened. Andrew, the groom, also stood up. Andrew stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. His face was red, but not with embarrassment, with rage. A contained, cold rage, more terrifying than any outburst. He took the microphone from Lily's hands, and she stared at him in disbelief. "I think there are some things everyone needs to know before Mrs. Peterson leaves," he said, his voice firm but trembling with emotion. I stopped walking, turning slowly. What was happening? Andrew barely knew me. We had greeted each other formally less than 3 hours ago for the first time ever. "Andrew, what are you doing?" she whispered, trying to get the microphone back. But he didn't give in. "When we started dating," Andrew continued, "Lily told me about her mother. She said she was a bitter, controlling woman who never supported her, who always put obstacles in her way." Every word was a stab. Was that how my daughter described me to the man she loved? I believed her because I trusted the woman I was going to marry, but a month ago, when we were organizing the wedding, something felt off. Lily was white as a sheet. "Andrew, don't do this, please." Lily insisted that her mother should be seated at the most distant table possible. She said she didn't want her to ruin our special day, that it would be better not to invite her, but people would talk if the bride's mother wasn't there. The room was in complete silence. Even the servers had stopped moving. That didn't seem right to me. So, without Lily knowing, I decided to do some research of my own. He looked at me, and there was compassion in his eyes. I discovered that Helen became a widow when Lily was only 12 years old, that she worked 2 jobs to support her all alone, that she sold the family home to pay for the private college Lily demanded, that she even sold her wedding ring so her daughter could do a semester abroad. Tears were now streaming freely down my face, but I didn't feel ashamed of them. Somehow, Andrew's words were washing away the shame I had felt moments before. I discovered that Helen never married again, even though she had proposals, because she said her priority was to be a good mother, that she keeps every photo, every memory, every one of her daughter's achievements like treasures, that she talks about Lily with pride to everyone, even when her daughter barely answers her calls. Lily was trying to snatch the microphone from his hands, but Andrew stood firm. "Stop, Andrew. This is our wedding." "Exactly, Lily. It's our wedding. And I cannot marry someone capable of such cruelty to her own mother." He took off his wedding ring and placed it on the table, with a clink that echoed through the silent ballroom. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, walking in my direction, "you don't deserve this treatment. You deserve respect and gratitude, not humiliation." He took my trembling hand and squeezed it gently. "Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you that this wedding will not be taking place. I cannot tie my life to a person capable of such contempt for her own family." A murmur exploded in the room. Lily stood still, paralyzed. The white dress now seemed ironically inadequate. Her face alternated between the paleness of shock and the redness of shame. "Andrew!" she shouted as he started to walk away. "You can't do this to me, not in front of everyone." The irony of her words was not lost on me. It was exactly what she had just done to me. Andrew turned to her one last time. "You just did the same thing to your mother, Lily. The difference is that she didn't deserve it. I do." And with that, he left the ballroom, leaving a trail of whispers and shocked stares behind him. I stood there, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to run, to flee from those stares. Another part wanted to go to Lily, to hug her, to tell her everything would be okay, like I always did when she was hurting. But something had changed inside me. I felt a strength I didn't know I had, a self-respect that had been buried under years of guilt and selflessness. Slowly, with my head held high, I walked towards the exit. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I walked like a woman who finally understood her own worth. "Mother!" Lily's scream cut through the air. "Mother, don't go, please!" I stopped at the door and looked back. My daughter was on her knees in the middle of the ballroom, her wedding dress fanned out around her like a white puddle, her makeup streaked with tears. She was the picture of desolation. For a moment, I almost gave in. I almost went back to comfort her. to take the blame as I always did, to make her world perfect again at the expense of my own. But I didn't. When you're ready to truly be my daughter, you know where to find me, I said, with a voice I didn't recognize as my own, calm, strong, and determined. But I'm not going to beg for your love anymore, Lily. I've already paid too high a price for something that should have been given freely. And I walked out into the night, leaving the chaos that had taken over the ballroom behind me. I sat on a bench in the hotel garden, breathing deeply the fresh night air. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without a weight on my chest. My phone rang. It was my sister, Carol, the only person in the family I had invited to join me, but she couldn't come because of the flu. Helen, how was the wedding? There was no wedding, I replied, surprised by the calmness in my voice. What do you mean? It's a long story, Carol. Can you come pick me up? I need a place to stay tonight. Of course, I'll leave right now. Are you okay? I reflected for a moment before answering. Was I okay? I had just gone through the most intense public humiliation of my life. My relationship with my only daughter was in ruins, and yet… I think so, Carol. I think for the first time in a long time, I'm actually okay. When Carol's car pulled up to the hotel entrance, I saw Lily coming out, still in her wedding dress, her face streaked with tears. She ran towards me. Mother, please don't leave me like this. I made a terrible mistake. Forgive me. I looked at her for a long time. This was my daughter, the little girl I had rocked in my arms, to whom I had sung lullabies, for whom I had sacrificed everything. But she was also the woman who had treated me like a nuisance for years, who had humiliated me in front of 200 people, who only wanted my forgiveness now because her perfect world had crumbled. Lily, I said calmly, for the first time in my life, this isn't about you. It's about me, about what I need, about what I deserve. What do you want from me? Nothing, Lily. Absolutely nothing. And that's what you need to understand. For the first time, I'm not here to solve your problems, to make you feel better, to be the perfect mother you never thought I was. But I need you, she sobbed. Andrew left me. Everyone's talking. I'm humiliated. Now you know how it feels. I got into Carol's car, closing the door as Lily continued to plead through the window. My sister looked at me with concern. Are you sure you want to do this? She looks devastated. She'll survive, I replied, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Just like I survived 15 years of disrespect and abandonment. As we drove away, I saw Lily's lonely figure on the sidewalk in the rearview mirror, her white dress spectral under the hotel lights. A part of my heart broke for her, but another part, a part that was growing every minute, knew that this separation was necessary, not just for me, but for her too. The beginning of the new Helen. At Carol's house, sitting in her cozy kitchen with cups of chamomile tea in front of us, I told her the whole story. My sister alternated between indignation and pride. How could she do that to you after everything you sacrificed for her? What's most striking to me, I said, stirring my tea thoughtfully, is that I never realized how badly I was being treated. I just accepted it, as if I deserved it, as if loving my daughter necessarily meant being despised by her. You've always been that way, Helen, ever since you were a little girl, always putting others first, always taking the blame, always sacrificing your wishes for the sake of others. I looked at my sister with curiosity. Is that true? Do you remember when Mum got sick? You were 17 and you gave up on college to take care of her. You gave up your dream of becoming a nurse so I could continue my studies. It was the right thing to do. You were younger, and when you married George, He wanted to move abroad for his job, but you convinced him to stay because I was pregnant and needed you close. I frowned, surprised I had never thought of those episodes that way. I was just doing what anyone would do. No, Helen, you were doing what you always do, sacrificing your happiness for others. And the worst part is that often people don't even notice or value those sacrifices. Like Lily. We sat in silence for a few minutes, letting those words sink in. What are you going to do now? Carol finally asked. I don't know, I admitted. For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan. I'm not thinking about how to fix the situation, how to make Lily feel better. Maybe it's time to think about yourself. What do you want, Helen? Not for Lily, not for me, not for anyone else. What do you want for yourself? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? I had been living for the needs of others for so long that I could barely imagine having my own desires. I don't know, I finally said, feeling strangely vulnerable. Well, you have time to figure it out. You can stay here as long as you need to. That night, lying in Carol's guest bed, I reflected on everything that had happened. The humiliation, yes, but also Andrew's surprising intervention. A man who barely knew me, but who had seen my worth when my own daughter couldn't. And more importantly, the revelation that maybe, just maybe, I deserved more than I had accepted until then. I fell asleep with those thoughts, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of Lily. Instead, I dreamed of a younger me, full of dreams and possibilities that I had never explored. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling of lightness, as if a weight I had carried for years had been lifted from my shoulders. I found Carol in the kitchen making coffee. Good morning, she said, smiling when she saw me. How do you feel? Different, I answered honestly. Like I have possibilities I never considered before. That's exactly how you should feel. Life isn't over, Helen. In fact, for you, it might just be beginning. As we drank coffee, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. It was Lily, calling insistently. After the fifth call, I decided to silence the phone. Aren't you going to answer? Carol asked. Not today. Maybe not for a few days. I need time to think, to understand what I want to do. Seems fair to me. For the first time, you're controlling that relationship, not her. Lily's calls soon turned into text messages. First, they were desperate pleas. Mother, please, answer me. I'm devastated. I don't know what to do without you. Then came the recriminations. You're abandoning me just when I need you most. What kind of mother does that? The last one made me laugh bitterly. What kind of daughter publicly humiliates her mother and then expects her to come running to fix everything? I commented, showing the message to Carol. The kind who was taught that that's acceptable, my sister replied wisely. You always put Lily first, Helen, even when she didn't deserve it. It was true, I realized. Ever since George died, I had dedicated myself entirely to Lily, neglecting my own needs and desires. And by doing so, I had taught her that my love was unconditional. No matter how she treated me, I would always be there. I would always forgive her. I would always put her needs above my own. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive her, I admitted, feeling a pang of guilt for the thought. Forgiveness is important, Helen, but not at the cost of your dignity. Maybe one day when Lily truly understands what she did and shows genuine remorse, you can consider forgiving her. But that day isn't today. I spent the next week at Carol's house, recovering emotionally. Lily continued to call and text me, each time more desperate. At times I felt my resolve waver. After all, she was my daughter, my only daughter. But every time I was about to give in, I remembered the expression on her face when she told me to leave. It hadn't been a moment of thoughtless rage. It had been calculated, planned. She had deliberately put me at a distant table. She had intentionally excluded me from all the preparations. And then, she had chosen that moment, in front of everyone, to humiliate me. On the 8th day after the non-wedding, someone knocked on Carol's door. It was Lily. She looked like she had aged years in a week. She was pale, with deep dark circles under her eyes, her dull hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Mother," she said when I opened the door, "we need to talk." Part of me wanted to hug her immediately, to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But another part, the part that was learning to value myself, stood firm. "I don't know if I'm ready for that conversation, Lily." "Please, Mother. I begged you. I called you. I texted you. You didn't answer any of them." "Just like you didn't answer my calls and messages for the last 3 years," I pointed out, surprised by my own bravery. She seemed genuinely shocked by my response. She was used to me giving in immediately, taking the blame, doing everything to please her. "Can I at least come in?" she finally asked. I hesitated, but ended up stepping aside. Lily walked in, sinking onto the living room sofa as if her legs could no longer hold her. "Andrew isn't answering my calls," she began. "He cancelled our honeymoon. He's returning all the gifts. I'm humiliated, Mother. Everyone is talking." I noted that her first concern wasn't about how I felt, but about how the situation affected her. Once again, it was all about her. "And how do you think I felt, Lily, when you kicked me out of your wedding in front of everyone?" She lowered her eyes. "I know I was wrong. What I did was horrible." "Why?" I asked, with a calmness I didn't feel. "Why did you do that?" "I don't know," she replied, tears starting to roll down her face. I think I've always felt guilty about how much you sacrificed for me. Seeing you reminded me of everything you gave up, of how your life could have been different without me. So you punished me for loving you." She looked up, surprised by my insight. "It wasn't conscious, but yes, I think so. Do you know how many times in the last 3 years I wanted to call you just to hear your voice? How many times I stayed up at night wondering what I had done wrong? Why you seemed to hate me so much?" "I don't hate you, Mother. I never hated you. But you treated me like you did hate me, as if I were a burden, a nuisance, someone to be tolerated in small doses." She cried more intensely now, with no words to defend herself. Part of me wanted to end her suffering, but I knew this conversation was necessary. Maybe it was the first time we were being truly honest with each other. "What do you want from me, Lily? Why are you here?" "I want you back in my life. I want your forgiveness. I want everything to go back to how it was before." "Before? When you ignored me? When you pretended I didn't exist, except when you needed something?" "No, Lily. I don't want things to go back to how they were." "So what? Are you going to abandon me when I need you most?" I took a deep breath, controlling my irritation. She always came back to that. Her needs, her feelings, her suffering. "I'm not abandoning you, Lily. I'm putting myself first, maybe for the first time in my life. And if you really want my forgiveness, you'll have to accept that things have changed. I've changed." "What do you want me to do?" she asked, seeming genuinely lost. "I want you to grow up, to understand that actions have consequences, to realize that you can't treat people like disposable objects and then expect them to be there when you need them." Her eyes widened at the harshness of my words. I had never spoken to her like that before. "And if you truly want to rebuild our relationship, you're going to have to start from scratch. You're going to have to get to know me as a person, not just as your mother. You're going to have to give me the same respect you would give anyone else. Lily looked at me as if she were seeing a stranger. I don't know if I can do that, she finally admitted. Then you have your answer. Are you rejecting me, after everything we've been through together? The disbelief in her voice was palpable. No, Lily. I'm setting boundaries. There's a huge difference. Rejection would be what you did to me, humiliating me publicly and kicking me out of your life. I'm just saying that, to come back into my life, you need to treat me with the respect I deserve. She was silent for a few minutes, processing my words. Finally, she stood up. I need to think about all this. It's not what I expected. And what did you expect? That you would forgive me immediately. That you would understand that I was under pressure, nervous about the wedding. That you would help me fix things with Andrew. I couldn't help but laugh, though without humour. Of course you expected that. Because that's how it's always been, hasn't it? I always put your feelings, your needs, your desires above my own. I walked her to the door. Before she left, she turned around. Do you think one day you'll be able to forgive me? I honestly don't know. I don't know if our relationship can be fixed. But I do know that it will never be the same. And maybe that's a good thing, Lily. For both of us. She nodded slowly with tears in her eyes and walked out. I stood there, watching her figure walk away down the street, feeling a contradictory mix of sadness and relief. Carol appeared beside me, putting an arm around my shoulders. You were amazing, she said. I've never seen you stand up for yourself like that before. Me neither, I admitted. It's strange, painful, but also liberating. We went back inside, and Carol poured me another cup of coffee. So now what? What are you going to do? The question hung in the air like a promise. For the first time in my adult life, I had no obligations. I didn't have a daughter to raise. I didn't have a husband to take care of. I had only myself and a blank future ahead of me. I don't know, I answered honestly. But I think it's time to find out who Helen is, besides being Lily's mother. 2 weeks after the conversation with Lily, I was back in my apartment, organizing my few possessions. The humiliation at the wedding had become a turning point in my life. Instead of sinking into depression, as might have happened, I felt a growing determination to rebuild my life, this time for myself. I started with small changes. I painted the apartment walls a light green, instead of the neutral beige I had chosen so as not to bother anyone. I bought plants, lots of plants, transforming my small living room into a green oasis that made me smile every morning. I reorganized my schedule. Instead of always being available for others, I started setting aside time for myself, to read the books I had always wanted to watch the movies I never had time for, to simply sit on the balcony with a cup of tea and watch the sunset. My phone rang one afternoon as I was putting up a new bookshelf. It was an unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Peterson? Is this Andrew? My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't spoken to him since that night at the wedding. Andrew, how are you? Fine, considering the circumstances, he replied with a humorless laugh. Still getting curious stares on the street? Still explaining to people why I called off the wedding? I'm sorry about that. I'm not. It was the right thing to do. In fact, I'm calling to thank you. To thank me? Yes. What happened that night was terrible for you, I know, but it saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't fully realize who Lily was until that moment. I was silent, not knowing how to respond. It was strange to hear someone talk about my daughter that way, even though I knew there was truth in his words. But I didn't call just for that, he continued. I wanted to ask if you'd like to get coffee with me. I have a proposal I'd like to discuss. Curious, I accepted. We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop downtown. Andrew was already waiting when I arrived, sitting at a table near the window. He looked different, thinner, with some scruff he didn't have before, but also lighter, as if he had left a weight behind. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, standing to greet me. "Thank you for coming." "You can just call me Helen," I replied, sitting down. "I think after what happened, formalities are unnecessary." He smiled. "Helen, then. How have you been?" "Surprisingly well," I admitted. I never thought I'd say this after being publicly humiliated, but in a way, I feel free, as if I've taken off a mask I didn't even know I was wearing. Andrew nodded with understanding. "I understand perfectly. I feel the same way, as if I narrowly escaped a life of pretense and empty compromises." We talked for a while about how our lives had changed in the past few weeks. Andrew said he had returned to work after cancelling the honeymoon, throwing himself into new projects as a form of therapy. "In fact, it's about one of those projects that I want to talk to you about," he finally said, taking a folder from his backpack. "I'm an architect, as you may know, and in recent years I've worked mostly on commercial projects, but I've always had a different dream." He opened the folder, revealing blueprints and drawings of a spacious, welcoming building with internal gardens and large windows that let in plenty of natural light. "This is the Centre for Renewal," he explained, "a space dedicated to older women who have been abandoned or mistreated by their families. A place where they can rebuild their lives, discover new talents, make friends, and most importantly, regain their self-worth." I looked at the drawings, impressed with the level of detail and the obvious care with which they had been made. "It's beautiful, Andrew. But why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to be my partner in this project." I blinked several times, sure I had heard him wrong. "Your partner? Me? But I don't know anything about architecture or running a centre like this." "But you know exactly how these women feel," he replied gently. "You've lived through what many of them are living through, and what's more, you have an inner strength that is inspiring. The way you maintained your dignity that night, how you are rebuilding your life now, that's exactly the kind of role model these women need." I was speechless, too emotional to respond immediately. "I'm not asking for a commitment now," Andrew continued, "just that you consider the idea. Come with me to visit the land where I intend to build. Talk to some of the people who are already involved in the project. See if it's something that resonates with you." "Why me?" I asked finally. "You barely know me." Andrew smiled, a sad but sincere smile. "Because that night, when you got up from that table and walked out of that room with your head held high after everything Lily had done, I saw something extraordinary. I saw a woman who had been broken, but who still maintained her dignity, her humanity, and I thought, is this what the world needs most? Is this what I want to support with my work?" I left that coffee shop with Andrew's folder under my arm and my mind buzzing with possibilities. The Centre for Renewal seemed like a dream, not just a building, but a symbol of everything I was beginning to value: self-worth, independence, genuine connections. The following week, Andrew took me to see the land, a spacious area on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by trees and with a breathtaking view of the mountains. "The main entrance will be here," he explained, walking the property with enthusiasm, "with a welcoming garden full of colourful flowers. In the back, we'll have greenhouses where the women can grow vegetables and flowers as a form of therapy and also as a source of income." "It's magnificent," I commented, imagining the completed place, full of life and purpose. "The initial funding is already secured," he continued. "An investor who supports social causes, but we need someone who truly understands the needs of these women, who can help plan the programs, the activities, the creation of a genuine community." And you think I can do that? I'm sure of it. You have life experience, empathy, and now a new perspective on fresh starts. As we drove back to the city, Andrew told me more about his own story, how he had lost his mother at a young age and had been raised by his grandmother, a strong woman who faced her husband's abandonment and society's prejudice to raise her grandson alone. When my grandmother died, 5 years ago, I promised myself I would do something to honor women like her. Women who give everything without expecting anything in return, who are strong when they need to be, who maintain their dignity even when the world treats them with contempt. Your grandmother would be proud, I said, genuinely touched by his story. I hope so, he replied, glancing briefly at the sky before turning his attention back to the road. In the weeks that followed, I immersed myself in the project with an enthusiasm I hadn't felt in years. I visited similar community centers in other cities, interviewed women who could benefit from the Center for Renewal, and researched programs and activities we could offer. I discovered talents I didn't know I had. I was good at listening to difficult stories without judgment, great at organizing events that connected people, and surprisingly effective at convincing local businesses to donate materials or services for the center. One day, as I was organizing some documents at the small temporary desk we had set up, I received a call from an unknown number. Mrs. Peterson, this is Marissa, from the Women's Network, a television show. We'd like to interview you about the Center for Renewal. I was stunned. How did they know about the center? We hadn't even started building yet. Andrew reached out to us. He said your personal story and your involvement in the project are inspiring. That many women could benefit from hearing about your journey. The idea of being on television, of exposing my story to strangers, terrified me at first. But then I thought of the women who might identify with my experience, who might find hope in my new beginning. Yes, I finally replied. I'd be happy to. When I hung up, Andrew walked into the office with coffee for both of us. So the Women's Network called. Yes. You planned this, didn't you? He shrugged, but couldn't hide a smile. I thought your story deserved to be heard, that other women in the same situation needed to know they're not alone. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for giving me a reason to believe again. The interview was scheduled for 2 weeks later. As I prepared, choosing clothes, practicing what I would say, and trying to control my nervousness, I realized how much I had changed in such a short time. The woman who had been humiliated at that wedding, the woman who had accepted her own daughter's contempt as if it were something she deserved, no longer existed. In her place was someone stronger, more aware of her own worth, someone capable of standing up for herself and reaching out to help other women. The night before the interview, I received a text from Lily. It was the first time she had reached out since our conversation at Carol's house. Mother, I heard from Aunt Carol that you're going to be on TV tomorrow. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. I'm still working on myself, as you suggested. Maybe one day we can talk again. With love, Lily. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a mix of emotions. Sadness for the lost time, a touch of hope for the future, but mostly a sense of peace. Whatever Lily's path from here on out, I was following my own, and for the first time, I felt like this path was exactly where I was meant to be. The Women's Network studio was smaller than I imagined, but welcoming. Warm lights illuminated the set, decorated in shades of blue and gold, with 2 comfortable armchairs in the center. The host, Regina Sanders, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a welcoming smile, greeted me with a hug. Helen, it's a pleasure to meet you. We read about your story and the Center for Renewal, and we are so excited to share this with our viewers. I sat in the armchair she indicated, trying to control the shaking in my hands. The cameras were intimidating, and the idea of thousands of people hearing my story made me nervous. But when Regina started asking questions, something strange happened. The words began to flow naturally, as if they had been waiting to be said for a long time. I talked about the disastrous wedding, without mentioning Lily's name, referring to her only as my daughter. I talked about the public humiliation, about how Andrew had stood up to defend me, about the painful discovery that my daughter had described me to others as a toxic and controlling mother. "How did you feel in that moment?" Regina asked, her eyes full of genuine compassion. "As if the world was crumbling," I answered honestly. "As if all the sacrifices I made, all the love I gave was worthless. As if I were invisible, disposable." "And now, how do you feel today?" I reflected for a moment. "Free," I finally said. Sad about the lost relationship with my daughter, of course, but also free to find out who I am besides being a mother. Free to value myself, to set boundaries, to demand the respect I deserve. Regina smiled. "And that's what the Centre for Renewal is all about, isn't it? A place where women can rediscover their identity and their worth." "Exactly. A place where they can heal their wounds, find new possibilities, create a community of mutual support, where they can realize that it's never too late to start over, to reinvent themselves." We talked for 20 more minutes about the details of the project, about the stories of other women I had met during my research, about the plans for professional training programs and emotional support that the centre would offer. When the interview ended, Regina squeezed my hands. "Helen, you are an inspiration. I hope you know that." I left the studio feeling strangely light, as if I had left a burden behind. Talking publicly about my experience, transforming my pain into something positive, had been surprisingly therapeutic. Andrew was waiting for me at the reception with a bouquet of sunflowers. "You were incredible," he said, handing me the flowers. "Authentic, moving, inspiring." "Thank you for convincing me to do this," I replied, emotional. At first I thought it would be exposing my wounds, but in reality it was like healing them. "Shall we go celebrate? I know a great Italian restaurant nearby." During dinner, Andrew shared the latest news about the project. The TV interview had generated immediate interest. Several companies had contacted us offering sponsorship, and women from all over the country sent messages asking how they could help or benefit from the centre. "We're creating something much bigger than I initially imagined," he said, amazed. "And a big part of that is thanks to you." "To me? But the project is yours. You were already planning everything even before you met me." "Yes, but you gave it life. Your story, your way of connecting with the other women, your ability to transform pain into purpose, that's what's making the Centre for Renewal special." I was speechless, touched by his sincere recognition. It was strange to think that in the midst of so much suffering, I had found something so meaningful. 2 weeks after the interview, construction on the Centre for Renewal officially began. I was at the construction site when the first excavator arrived, feeling an almost childish excitement at seeing the first movement of dirt. Andrew was by my side, with the same enthusiasm in his eyes. "In 6 months, if all goes well, we'll be having the grand opening," he said. "Can you imagine?" I closed my eyes for a moment, visualizing the completed centre, full of women rebuilding their lives, supporting each other, discovering new possibilities. "I can't wait," I replied. That afternoon, as we were driving back to the city, my phone rang. It was Lily. "Mother, I saw your interview on TV. I didn't know you were involved in such an incredible project." "Thank you," I replied, feeling strangely calm. There was no longer the anxiety that used to accompany our interactions, nor the desperate need to please her. "You seemed different, more confident." More yourself, somehow. I feel different, I admitted. More connected with myself, with what really matters to me. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mother, I know you said you needed time, and I understand, but I wanted to know if we could meet, just to talk. I reflected for a moment. Part of me still feared falling back into the old pattern. Me giving in, her dominating, me sacrificing, her taking. But another part, the stronger part that was growing every day, knew that I could set boundaries, that I could meet her without losing myself in the process. Okay, I finally replied, but in a public place, like a coffee shop, and with the understanding that this doesn't mean everything is resolved between us. Of course, she agreed quickly. Whatever you prefer. I just want to I just want to get to know you better, the new you. We agreed to meet the next day at a quiet coffee shop downtown. When I hung up, Andrew looked at me with curiosity. Was that your daughter? Yes, she wants to meet. And how do you feel about that? Cautious, I answered honestly, but also curious. Maybe she really wants to change. Or maybe she just misses me now that she's realized she can't control me. Either way, I think I'm ready to find out. Be careful, he said gently. Don't let her pull you back into old patterns. I won't let her, I promised, surprising myself with my certainty. This Helen here knows her own worth now. The coffee shop was practically empty when I arrived the next day, 15 minutes before our agreed-upon time. I chose a table near the window, where the natural light created a cozy atmosphere. I ordered a cappuccino and waited, trying to stay calm. Lily arrived promptly. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, her clothes simpler than she usually wore, and she had less makeup. There was something softer about her face, less of the arrogance I had become accustomed to seeing in recent years. "Hi, Mother," she said, sitting across from me. She seemed nervous, insecure, a vulnerability she rarely showed. "Hi, Lily, are you okay?" "I'm surviving," she replied with a small smile. "The last few months haven't been easy." "I can imagine." "You look good," she commented, watching me closely. "There's a different light about you." "I think there is," I agreed. Finding a purpose, feeling like I'm making a difference in the lives of other women, has been transformative. A waitress came over and Lily ordered tea. When we were alone again, she took a deep breath, as if gathering her courage. "Mother, I need to tell you some things. Things I've discovered about myself in therapy, as you suggested." "I'm listening," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, even though my heart was racing. "I've discovered that the way I treated you, the cruelty, the distance, wasn't really about you. It was about me, about my own inability to deal with guilt." "Guilt?" "Yes, guilt for everything you sacrificed for me, for knowing deep down that I could never repay you, that I could never love as completely as you do." She paused, fighting back tears. "It was easier to blame you, to treat you like a burden, than to face the fact that I was a terrible daughter. So I pushed you away. I humiliated you. I did everything to make you hate me, because that would be easier than admitting that I was a terrible daughter." Her words hit me like waves, painful but also purifying in a way. Finally, after so many years, there was truth between us. "I don't know if I can fix what I did," she continued. "I know the damage might be irreparable, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand that the meanness was in me, not in you." I was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. There were no easy answers, no clear path ahead. "Lily, I appreciate your honesty. It's more than we've had in a long time, but rebuilding our relationship won't be simple or fast. There will be times when you'll want to go back to the old patterns, and so will I. I know. And I can't promise you it will be like it was before. In fact, I hope it won't be, because what we had before wasn't healthy for either of us. What do you mean? I mean that I also have a part in what we became. I allowed you to treat me badly because I believed I didn't deserve better. I put your needs above my own because I thought that was what maternal love was. But it wasn't. It was just low self-esteem disguised as sacrifice. She looked at me in surprise. We had never had such an honest conversation. So what do we do now? She asked. We start over, like two adults who respect each other, who set healthy boundaries, who don't expect the other to be perfect, but demand that they be honest. I would like that, she said softly. Me too, I replied, realizing it was true. Maybe we can't go back to what we were, but we can build something new, something better. When we said goodbye that afternoon, there were no grandiose promises or emotional declarations, just a silent understanding that we were both working on ourselves, and that maybe, with time and effort, we could find a middle ground where our wounds could begin to heal. The following months passed in a whirlwind of activity. The construction of the Centre for Renewal was progressing quickly, and every visit to the construction site filled me with a joy I had never felt before. It was fascinating to see Andrew's drawings come to life, the walls going up, the windows being installed, the gardens taking shape. My relationship with Lily was evolving slowly. We started with bi-weekly meetings at coffee shops, cautious conversations about safe topics. Little by little, the tension subsided, and we were able to start talking about more difficult things. The past, the resentments, the misunderstandings that had distanced us. You never told me how hard it was for you after Dad died, she said during one of our meetings. You always pretended everything was fine, that you could handle everything alone. I thought that's what you needed, I explained. A strong mother who wouldn't fall apart, who could give you security. But that made you seem almost superhuman, as if you didn't need help or understanding, as if you were a machine of sacrifice, not a real person with real needs. It was a surprisingly mature insight, and it made me reflect on how my own inability to show vulnerability had contributed to the chasm between us. I think you're right, I admitted. I never gave you the chance to really know me or to take care of me, to give back in some way. And that made you an impossible weight to carry, she concluded. Because how could I ever repay something so perfect? They were difficult conversations, but necessary. Each one rewrote a little of our history together, bringing a deeper and truer understanding. Andrew watched this rapprochement with a careful eye, always reminding me to maintain my boundaries, not to fall into the old patterns of extreme sacrifice. You deserve to be loved for who you are, Helen, he would often say, not for what you do for others, but for who you are. It was a revolutionary concept for me, to be loved not for my usefulness, not for my capacity for sacrifice, but simply for existing. Meanwhile, the Centre for Renewal was nearing completion. Every detail had been thought of with care, from the welcoming decor to the programs that would be offered. There would be craft workshops, professional training courses, emotional support groups, adapted physical activities, and a small cafe run by the women themselves as a source of income. I want it to be a place of healing, but also of growth, I explained to Andrew, as we finalized the details for the grand opening. A place where women can mourn their losses, but also discover new beginnings. That's exactly what it's becoming, he replied with a proud smile. And a big part of that is thanks to your vision, The grand opening was scheduled for a Sunday afternoon, 6 months after construction began. In the days leading up to the event, I could barely sleep from the anticipation. On the morning of the opening, I was so nervous that I spilled coffee on the blouse I had carefully chosen. I had to change in a hurry, opting for an emerald green dress that Carol had helped me choose weeks before. "You look beautiful," my sister said when she came to pick me up. A true community center director. I smiled nervously. It was still difficult to see myself that way. As a leader, a person capable of making a difference in the lives of other women. For so many years, I had defined myself only as Lily's mother, as the woman who took care of others, who sacrificed, who stayed in the background. When we arrived at the Center for Renewal, I was surprised by the number of people who were already waiting. There were journalists with cameras, local officials, and dozens of women. Some I had met during the project preparation, others I had never seen before, but who had heard about the center and came to see it with their own eyes. Andrew was waiting for me at the entrance, elegant in a navy blue suit, with a nervous smile that mirrored mine. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, trying to control the tremble in my voice. Together, we walked to the small stage that had been set up in the main garden. The center was even more beautiful than I had imagined. The walls were painted in soft tones, the huge windows let in natural light, the flowering gardens surrounded the main building. "Good morning, everyone," Andrew began when we stood in front of the microphone. "Welcome to the grand opening of the Center for Renewal." He spoke for a few minutes about the center's mission, the programs that would be offered, the importance of creating a space where women could find not only emotional support, but also practical tools to rebuild their lives. But the Center for Renewal wouldn't be what it is today without a very special person, he continued, turning to me. Helen Peterson, who agreed to be my partner in this project, bringing not only her life experience, but her extraordinary ability to transform pain into purpose. My face burned as all eyes turned to me. I still wasn't used to being the center of attention, to being publicly recognized. When it was my turn to speak, my hands were shaking so much that I could barely hold the microphone. But as soon as I started, the words flowed naturally, as if they had been waiting a lifetime to be said. 7 months ago, I was an invisible woman, I began, feeling an attentive silence form around me. A woman who had dedicated her life to taking care of others, to making sacrifices, to putting herself last. A woman who believed her worth was only in what she could do for others, not in who she was. I paused, looking for faces in the crowd. I saw Carol smiling proudly. I saw several of the women I had met during the project preparation, some with tears in their eyes. And to my surprise, I saw Lily, standing discreetly at the back of the group, with an expression that mixed sadness and admiration. Then, something happened, I continued. Something painful, humiliating, that made me question everything I believed about myself. And in the midst of that pain, I found a truth I had ignored for decades, that I also deserved to be seen, that I also deserved respect, that I also had the right to say no, to set boundaries, to demand reciprocity in my relationships. Several women in the audience nodded, as if my words echoed their own experiences. The Center for Renewal was born from that revelation. It's not just a place for women to hide from the world or lick their wounds. It's a place to discover their own worth, to rebuild their identities beyond the roles society imposed on them, to learn that it's never, ever too late to start over. When I finished my speech, I was met with deafening applause. Women I had never seen before came to hug me, to share their stories, to say how they identified with my experience. "You gave me hope," said a woman in her 70s, holding my hands tightly. "I thought I was too old to change, to demand respect from my children who treat me like a burden, but you showed me that it's never too late. Those words moved me deeply. The idea that my pain, my story, could bring hope to other women was something I had never considered. After the formal ceremony, there was a cocktail reception in the garden. As I talked with guests, I saw Lily approaching cautiously. "Mother," she said, looking out of place in the middle of the celebration. "Your speech was incredible. I never imagined you could speak like that in public." "Me neither," I admitted with a small smile. "It's amazing what we can discover about ourselves when circumstances change." "Can I? Can I see the center? I'd like to see what you helped create." It was an unexpected moment of connection. I showed Lily every corner of the Center for Renewal, explaining the purpose of each space, how we had planned every detail with the needs of the women who would frequent it in mind. "It's impressive," she commented when we reached the back garden, a quiet space designed for meditation and reflection. "You seem so passionate about all this." "I am," I confirmed. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm doing something that is genuinely mine, something that reflects who I am, not just what I can do for others." Lily was silent for a moment, contemplating the small, ornamental pond in the center of the garden. "I think I never really knew you," she said finally. "I only knew the mother, not the woman." "That's true," I agreed. "But that wasn't just your fault. I also never allowed myself to be fully seen. It was easier, safer, to hide behind the role of the selfless mother. And now? Now I'm learning to be Helen, not just Lily's mother, not just George's widow, not just the director of the Center for Renewal, just Helen, with all my flaws, qualities, desires, and fears." She smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "I like this Helen. I wish I had known her sooner." "It's never too late," I replied, using the same words I had said in my speech. "For either of us." When the grand opening ended, I was exhausted, but in a good way. Like someone who had completed a marathon, like someone who had finally reached the top of a mountain after a long climb. Andrew and I stayed behind after everyone had left, contemplating the empty center, which was full of promises. "We did it," he said, putting an arm around my shoulders. "It seems like a dream, doesn't it?" "Yes," I agreed. "A dream I never knew I had until it happened." He looked at me with affection, a look that had become familiar in recent months. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but there was an affection there, a mutual admiration, that could, perhaps, turn into something more over time. "What's next?" he asked. "Now," I replied, looking around at the space we had created together. "We start the real work." 2 years after the grand opening of the Center for Renewal, I was in my office, reviewing the monthly reports with a feeling of accomplishment that still surprised me. What had started as a small project to help women rebuild their lives had transformed into something much bigger. Over 400 women had passed through the center in these 2 years. Some came just to participate in the weekly support groups, others for the professional training courses, and still others for the psychological counseling services. But they all left different, stronger, more aware of their own worth, more prepared to set healthy boundaries in their relationships. We had expanded the programs to include legal assistance for women facing child custody issues or domestic violence, financial literacy classes, and even a small cooperative that sold crafts produced by the participants. My personal life had also changed in ways I never imagined. My relationship with Lily, though still marked by scars from the past, had evolved into something new and healthier. We weren't best friends. We didn't have the intense connection that some mothers and daughters share, but there was mutual respect, honesty, and a conscious effort to be maintained from both sides, not to fall back into old toxic patterns. And then there was Andrew. Our relationship had grown slowly, carefully, like a plant that needs time to take root before it can blossom. At first, we were just partners in the center project, then friends, confidants, and finally something more. Helen, Marissa, our secretary, interrupted my thoughts. The TV River crew is here for the interview. I looked at the clock, surprised that time had passed so quickly. It was the Centre for Renewal's 2-year anniversary, and we had agreed to give an interview to talk about the project's impact on the community. I'll be right there, I replied, quickly organizing the papers on my desk. The interview would be in the main garden, now even more beautiful than it was on opening day, with trees that had grown, flowers in full bloom, and stalls where women from the centre sold their crafts. Andrew was there, talking to the reporter, a young woman in her 30s with an enthusiastic smile. "Ah, this is Helen Peterson, my partner at the Centre for Renewal," he introduced me when I approached. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Peterson," the reporter said, shaking my hand. "I'm Daniela Thompson from TV River. Your story inspired many of our viewers when it first aired." I smiled, still uncomfortable with the idea of being an inspiration, but accepting that, somehow, my experience had touched other women. During the interview, we talked about the centre's growth, about the stories of transformation we had witnessed, about plans for the future, maybe opening a branch in another city, expanding the programs to include specific support for elderly women who often face abandonment and loneliness. "Helen," Daniela said at one point, "your personal story is known to many of our viewers. As a woman who was publicly humiliated by her own daughter and found the strength to start over, how does that experience continue to influence your work at the centre?" It was a question I had answered many times, but it never lost its impact. It always made me reflect on how much I had changed, on how much I still had to learn. "The humiliation was just the trigger," I replied, after a moment of reflection. "The real learning came afterward, when I realized that I had spent decades defining myself only by the roles I played in the lives of others: mother, wife, caregiver. When those roles were questioned, when I was rejected by the person for whom I had sacrificed everything, I had to face a terrifying question. Who am I besides these roles?" I paused, looking around at the centre we had built, at the women working at the stalls, at the garden that was blooming under our care. That's the question many of the women who come to us are trying to answer. Who are they besides wives who were betrayed? Besides mothers whose children rejected them? Besides caregivers whose services are taken for granted? It's a difficult journey, sometimes painful, but also incredibly liberating. The interview continued for 20 more minutes, with Andrew and I alternating answers, sharing success stories, always with altered names to protect privacy, talking about the difficulties and achievements of the past 2 years. When we finished, Daniela turned off the recorder and smiled. "This was wonderful," she said. "You've built something truly special here." "Thank you," I replied, feeling a wave of pride. Sometimes I still surprise myself when I look around and realize how much we've grown. After the TV crew left, Andrew and I walked through the garden, greeting the women at the stalls, stopping to admire the crafts, and talking with the centre's attendees who had come for the day's activities. "You look happy," he commented as we sat on a bench under a flowering tree. "I am," I confirmed, in a way I never imagined was possible at 64 years old. "It's never too late to be happy," he replied, taking my hand. "Your own story is proof of that." We nodded in silence, contemplating the centre that had become not only a refuge for wounded women, but a symbol of new beginnings, of second chances, of self-discovery. In that moment, I saw Lily approaching on the main path. In the last 2 years, She had become a regular visitor to the centre, initially just to see me, then as an occasional volunteer, helping with special events or with the cafe. "Mother," she called out, waving. "Did I get here in time for the interview?" "It just finished," I replied, getting up to greet her with a light hug. "But it will air next week on Friday." "I'll watch it," she promised. "I wanted to see how you were doing." "Your mother was brilliant, as always," Andrew commented, also getting up to greet her. Lily smiled, a softer, more mature smile than the one I had known before. The last few years had been difficult for her too. The cancelled wedding, the public humiliation, the loss of some friendships that proved to be superficial. But like me, she had found her way through the pain. "I brought something for the centre," she said, holding out a box she was carrying. "Some books for the library, classics I had at home, and don't use anymore." It was a small gesture, but a significant one. Once again, an attempt to build bridges, to find her own place in this new world we had created. "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched. "The women are going to love them." As Lily went to drop off the books at the centre's library, Andrew looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "It's incredible, isn't it? How life can change completely in such a short time." "Yes," I agreed, thinking about everything that had happened in the past 2.5 years. Who would have thought that the worst night of my life would become the beginning of the best one? That night, after a day full of activities at the centre, I returned to the apartment I now shared with Andrew. It was a bright and welcoming place, with walls full of photographs, not just of the two of us, but of women whose lives had been transformed by the Centre for Renewal, of special moments we had shared over these years. As we prepared dinner together, a routine we had established since we moved in together 6 months ago, I reflected on how different my life was now. At 64 years old, I had found a purpose that went beyond taking care of others. I had discovered talents I didn't know I had. I had built relationships based on mutual respect instead of unilateral sacrifice. I had learned to say no when necessary, and yes when I really wanted to. "A penny for your thoughts," Andrew said, interrupting my reflection. "I was thinking about how unpredictable life is," I replied. "How something that seems like a disaster at the time can turn into the best thing that ever happened to you." "Are you talking about the wedding?" "Yes. If Lily hadn't humiliated me like that, if you hadn't stood up to defend me, I would probably still be living on the fringes of her life, accepting crumbs of attention, sacrificing my happiness for someone who didn't even notice." Andrew put his arms around me, a hug that had become my safe place in the world. "You would have found your way regardless," he said. "Maybe it would have taken longer, maybe it would have been less dramatic, but a woman with your inner strength, with your capacity to love and reinvent herself, always finds her way to the light." I smiled, moved by his words, by the recognition of a strength I myself had only recently discovered. "What makes me happiest," I continued, "is knowing that I'm not just surviving, I'm not just existing, I'm really living, creating, contributing to something bigger than myself. And inspiring other women to do the same," he added. The phone rang, interrupting our conversation. It was Carol, with news about an award the Centre for Renewal had been nominated for, a national recognition for innovative social projects. "We're finalists," she exclaimed, barely containing her excitement. "Among the top 3 projects in the country." The news was surprising and thrilling. When I hung up, I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of life. "From being humiliated at a wedding to a finalist for a national award," I commented. "Life has an interesting sense of humour." "And a sense of justice too," Andrew replied. "You deserve every recognition, every moment of joy, every opportunity that comes your way." That night, lying next to Andrew, I mentally retraced the journey of the past few years. The pain of rejection, the painful discovery of how my daughter really saw me, the shock of realizing that I had spent decades negating myself in the name of love, but also the joy of discovering who I was besides those roles, the pleasure of building something meaningful, the peace of establishing relationships based on mutual respect instead of emotional dependency. The revenge I never knew I wanted wasn't to make Lily suffer or to make her regret what she had done. The true revenge was finding my own happiness, independent of her, building a full and meaningful life that didn't depend on anyone's specific approval or love. And in the process, paradoxically, I had created space for a healthier relationship with my daughter. A relationship based not on obligation or guilt, but on mutual respect, on the acceptance of our differences, on the understanding that we were separate people, with our own lives, who chose to be present in each other's lives. The woman who had been kicked out of that wedding, who had walked among 200 curious pairs of eyes with her face burning with shame, no longer existed. In her place was someone stronger, truer, more complete. Someone who had finally learned that loving others didn't mean nullifying herself, that being a mother didn't mean being only a mother, that at 64 years old there was still time to discover new talents, forge new connections, and build a life that reflected who she truly was. As I fell asleep, I felt a peace I had never known before. The peace of someone who finally understood that true love, for herself and for others, never demands the sacrifice of one's own essence. The peace of someone who discovered, albeit late, that it's never too late to start living authentically. It's never too late to become the heroine of your own story. Now, if you liked this story, click on this next video that's appearing on the screen. Because in it, a story of betrayal and rebellion like you've never seen before.